Welcome to First Take on YouTube. Here with Christopher Mad Dog Russo, Stephen A. Smith. I'm Molly Karam. Yesterday was World Mental Health Day. And New York Jets defensive lineman Solomon Thomas has been one of the leading advocates for addressing mental health and suicide prevention. In 2018, Thomas lost his sister Ella to suicide. She was just 24 years old. Solomon then founded the defensive line to end the epidemic of youth suicide, especially for young people of color, by transforming the way we communicate and connect about mental health.
I'm trying to lead by representation, by example of an athlete in this gladiator sport, this big bravado sport where we have to always be tough. I'm trying to make sure guys know they see a guy like me who struggles, who has struggled, who has gone through loss, who's gone through his own depression, gone through grief, gone through performance anxieties, other certain things. To let guys know it's okay to feel like this. Like, we're human at the end of the day. We're not just athletes. We're more than an athlete. And I think that's so important for us to understand, so we can understand that, hey, we have a lot more in common, and getting help is something that we can do.
100%. We go to the doctor if there's an issue with our physical health, and our mental health needs even more attention than that. How important do you think it is for athletes, not only athletes, but everybody, to address any mental issues they're struggling with?
I think athletes, very important, based on the idea that we have put them on such a high pedestal that we think they're impregnable. There's never anything wrong with them. They have life in the palm of their hands, and you realize that that is not always the case. So Kevin Love, which got it started there, 2 or 3 years ago, I think it's very, very significant. So I am all for it. You know, we all think it's easy. What a life. How could you not want to be an athlete? And they go through the same daily struggles as the rest of us do. And, entertainers as well. You've heard a lot of actors and musicians. So I'm all for it. Good for Solomon Thomas on that, Stevie.
Without question, great for him, and a tremendous on his part. I want to say this, though. We have to be, the heightened level of sensitivity and the core decency that's in all of us has to be heightened. Yesterday on my podcast, I brought up Dak Prescott in a different way. His brother committed suicide.
Right.
And he admitted days before his brother committed suicide that he was battling some issues with depression and anxiety. And they both articulated how it emanated from losing his mom 7 years earlier. I've never been to that point, Doggy, but I acknowledge that when I lost my mother, I was in a real, real bad state. And, I did a disservice to Molly. I did a disservice to Max Kellerman when he was sitting on the show, and various others. There were days, man, that I was here, but I wasn't here, because the level of misery that I felt was so profound. And I felt that way never contemplating suicide. So when I hear of somebody thinking about that, talking about those things, and speaking about it in such a real and debilitating fashion as it pertains to the kind of effect that it has on them, I can only imagine how much it's ravaging them emotionally and spiritually, when you just feel like the days are just perpetually dark and there's never going to be any light. What scares me about the sports world when we talk about this subject is that the sports world encourages fandom. Fandom means you take a side. And if you take a side, as a fan, you want to do your part to influence your side, gaining an advantage over the opposite side. And if you can, in any way that you deem necessary or any way that you deem effective, can find a way to alter the ability of the opposition that you're not favoring, then ultimately it's going to involve heckling, it's going to involve teasing, it's going to involve trolling and things of those nature. How do you police that? Because in the world of sports, whether it's collegiately or professionally, we're asking people to give us their fervor and their passion to come along with their dollars. If you're asking them to do those things, and they're doing those things, and ultimately they see it has an impact towards favoring the side that they want favored, but the other side can't embrace it and take it strictly as just sports, it affects them in a far more detrimental way. I don't know how we overcome that, which is what makes sports scary.
I think as much as money provides comfortability, money also can create more problems too. In a situation like that, you can't control what other people do, but when you get help and seek help for mental health, you learn to deal with those kind of situations so it doesn't affect you negatively.
Right, but
and I think it's hugely important also that these athletes are speaking out, because there's so many people at home that are dealing with this and struggling privately. And it's hey, Kevin Love spoke out, Naomi Osaka, Dak
DeMar
Prescott.
DeRozan.
If they're dealing with this, I can deal with this too. I'm not alone. You feel a connection. And then you also feel emboldened and you realize that it takes more strength to get help than it does to just let it lie flat and ignore it.
But sometimes, I got to tell you this, Molly, and it's hard to say this, but this is just the truth. All things are not created equal. And what I mean by that is that the resources that everybody says athletes, like all athletes have the same resources. I know certain athletes that are well-to-do because of the money that they make. Others are well off because they know how to plan and operate accordingly. Others are well off because they don't have as many people to take care of. But you have other athletes that might not be making as much, but they may be making more than the average Joe, but they got 15, 20 different relatives. And when you come from nothing and you elevate yourself to a certain stratosphere, those who are in your circle believes you ain't rich, they're rich. And it's hard to fend them off. And then when you're battling those things lend itself towards stress. It elevates the level of pressure. And when it elevates that level of pressure and you feel compelled to live up to it, the second you don't feel like you're doing so, that tsunami of expectations going awry ultimately fall on your shoulders. And you don't feel like you have the means necessary to get that very help that you accurately just articulated they may need. So those problems are far-reaching with a whole bunch of tentacles, and it's really, really hard to maneuver your way through it. I can tell you that from personal experience. I'm not even an athlete. I'm sitting up here on national television. I'm making a good living. I had a lot of relatives, a lot of friends, and all that stuff. You had a lot of people that expected things. They didn't hope. They didn't ask. They literally came with an expectation. And I had to be strong enough to say no, and it took me years to do it. And I'm in my mid-50s now, years. These guys are getting money in their 20s. And so somebody that helped them get to that point was just years ago. It's hard to turn that away.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot to juggle. And we just look at the fame and the money and think it's all amazing, but there's a lot that comes with it.
And there's a lot of fan disconnect with athletes. They play the fantasy football. If the athlete doesn't play well, he yells and screams. They drink a lot of alcohol going to the ball games. They got to pay PSL licenses. They spend a fortune.
That's right.
And they spend all day, and if they player lets them down, they're going to get all ticked off. They go buy an NBA game, they got expensive seats, the player misses a jump shot, they have the over-under, they go crazy. So there's a lot of disconnect with the athletes, which makes it even worse. And the athlete doesn't feel connected to his fandom in a lot of cases, which creates more
But there's many
anxiety.
people, regardless athlete or not, that during these times, especially with all the phones and all the pressures going on, dealing with depression and anxiety. And I want to pull up that full screen that we have right now, and just remember that you can get help. We have a hotline right there if you take a look. And obviously, if you're feeling any of those pressures, reach out, get help, talk to someone. You don't need to fight alone, and you're not the only one dealing with it. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to watch First Take Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. on ESPN.